Hello all and welcome to my channel. I'm Colette and this is Witchways, and I want to talk to you today about household spirits, what their names are, what part of the world they're from, and a little bit about each of them. I've time-stamped this so that if you want to just go to specific regions, you can do that. I hope you enjoy. So I have a video that is a much broader viewpoint of house spirits and how to work with them and what they do, what they don't do, and in fact it's one of my favorite videos that I've ever made. I'll link it in the description or maybe in the comments. And I wanted to do this one because I feel like names are important in the spirit world. And just to quickly sum up what household spirits are, they probably originated as spirits of place, local land spirits, or minor local deities of a particular region, and offerings were made to them when people wanted to build or settle in an area, sort of as a thank you for letting them settle there. So over time, those spirits moved more closely into relationship with the humans. Altars were built inside, offerings were given regularly, and they are often very important in the family's life and took a really big role. I think it's really helpful to look at your genetic background, even if it's just a quick search around where your last name comes from, what land that's from, and that way it can help you figure out what kind of household spirits might be interested in you. And I'm going to divide this up by region. Most of the ones I'm talking about today come from my genetic background of Europe. In my background, originally most of these spirits were described as quite large or human size, but over time they became diminished in size. Most of them can become invisible or take the shape of an animal or a human. They can be tricky if offended and even do a lot of damage, although it's possible a lot of the reports of that came post-Christianization when there started being a little more tension between the spirit world and the human world. Many of them are now considered to be quite small, and almost all of them like offerings of porridge with butter. They also like milk or cream as an offering. Some of them like honey as an offering. And they're all very similar in some ways, but in the spirit world, names are important. And I think it's respectful to call them by the names that your ancestors did. Let's talk about Hobs. They tend to be the name of the spirits that live in mid and northern England and up to the Scottish border. They tend to work more in farmyards than in houses, and they might leave you as if you give them clothes. They're often naked, but they are truly powerful and can be malicious if they are offended, and they can be extremely difficult to get rid of. There are stories of people leaving houses, burning houses down, or moving in some special way to make sure that they don't follow, even though other people really do a lot to attract them because they are so helpful. Hobgoblins are similar, but once Christianity took hold in the medieval era, they were seen as much more mischievous, and things about their mischief were reported more often. Sometimes they're seen as being more associated with the house than the farm. Goblins are also closely related, but they are usually described as small and grotesque creatures that can be harmful or frightening. There's not a lot of stories, or any stories as far as I can tell, about them being helpful. They're often described as malicious or actual thieves. Goblins first appeared in the Middle Ages, probably as a way of Christianity demonizing some of the local spirits like Hobs, Brownies, etc. All these house spirits were literally seen as demons by the church, who fought battles against them and lectured against them. Goblins are found all over England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. Brownies are related to lots of other Celtic spirits, but they usually are found in Scotland. They do household chores at night and sometimes farm work. They like a bowl of milk or cream left specifically on the hearth. They're usually naked or dressed in rags and can turn invisible when they choose, and they're described as having brownish skin. If you try to give them clothing or baptize them, which none of us would ever do, they will be offended and leave. They are sometimes described as the spirit of a former house servant and can also be mischievous. And I did make a handout for this video that lists the countries that belong in each region, if that might be helpful to you, as well as the names of which types of house spirits are in each region. So check that out. It'll be on my Patreon page and it will be free to the public, and I will put a link in the comments. Kobolds are small, usually invisible creatures from Germanic traditions that are still present today in modern German folklore. If they do appear, they are the size of children, but they can take the form of fire, animals, candles, or even human. They help with domestic tasks, but there's a lot of ambivalence about whether or not they're actually helpful. And I think that again has shifted over time. And they often like to trick or frighten humans. There also are types of kobolds that work in mines and on ships. Kobolds are strongly associated with the element of fire and usually live near the hearth. Some sources say that they announce their presence by leaving a mess around the hearth, and if you leave that mess there instead of cleaning it up, they will stay and be helpful. Sometimes kobolds bring wealth to the house, often by stealing it from others. They like food or beer as offerings and must be treated with respect. If you need one to leave, you can try the age-old remedy of giving them clothing. The other remedies are all fairly extreme. You can get an exorcism. I don't know that that has to be a Christian exorcism. It might be a triple clearing of some kind. And other remedies listed are burning down the house and leaving a wagon wheel in front of it. Clearly not something I am recommending or that we would consider doing today. These are all house spirits from Northern European lands, and they're generally seen as small and having that sort of typical long pointed triangular shaped cap, and sometimes they look a little bit like a garden gnome. Besides being associated with houses, they are associated with winter solstice and the Christmas season. They live in houses and in barns in rural areas and quietly act as guardians to the people and animals of the home. Like all the others, they don't forgive being offended, but unlike the others, they only create damage or are tricky if they are offended. These spirits are all a little judgy, but in a good way in my mind. They really dislike people who disrespect the land or their farms or mistreat the animals, and they are especially fond of horses. Often they will braid their hair, their manes, their tails. Sometimes they're considered to be the soul of the first inhabitant of the land, come back to make sure that the land is treated respectfully. And that belief is actually fairly common about house spirits in many different places. The origins of house spirits vary a lot. Offerings to these kinds of spirits include a bowl of porridge with butter, especially during solstice or the Christmas season. The word Hausvater means house spirit, and they're similar to many of the other kinds of house spirits that we've talked about. And they're also related to other regional spirits like Landesvater, which are land spirits or land guardians, Vatnsvater, which is water spirits, and they are small invisible beings, although they can take the shape of animals or even humans if they choose. They are guardians of the home and help protect against evil spirits. They work magically to ensure the prosperity and well-being of all members of the household. They're also helpful with preventing fires, disease, and misfortune, and they even help with daily chores, and they like offerings of food or drink, especially as holidays. Like the others, they like porridge or even a bowl of water placed somewhere in the house or in the barn. Hausvaters also will often take the wishes and dreams of household members to the spirit world, and so in that way they act as mediators between the other world and us. Okay, I'm just gonna have to read these names directly off my notes because I just can't hold them in my brain. The names are not real familiar to me. So, Domovoy, if I'm pronouncing that right, is the Russian name for house spirits that are part of the Slavic magical beings pantheons. In Poland, they are called Domowick, and also in Serbia and in Ukraine, Domovic, and in Belarus, Domovic. So very similar names, and I don't know how different those sound in those regions. In that tradition, they are seen as the original ancestor of the family and are considered a minor deity. Their job in the house is generally to protect the welfare of all household members, and they are particularly protective of children and animals, and they will fight the spirits of other places or other houses to protect them. They will also predict future dangers and try and warn the family about them. In Russia, one of the things that people do with the Domovi is to sit in silence with them for a while because they don't like to be alone. They're usually described as old gray men, although they can also take the form of animals or an ancestor of the family. People kept small statues of them in their homes until very recent times. These spirits are usually offered food that is left over after the meal, or something like bread and salt wrapped in a white cloth. And while this is being given, the rest of the members of the family would bow in each of the four directions and offer blessings and prayers, which reminds me a lot of ancestor worship or hearth goddess worship. If you want them to come into your house when you move to a new area, you should give them the first slice of bread from your first meal that you cook in the home. House spirits sometimes have specific things that will get them to leave. Personally, I like to have a good relationship with them so it doesn't get to that point. Or if I do need to ask them to leave for some reason, to work through the mediation of a protector spirit or a protective deity that might have some kind of relationship with them, just to make sure we all stay on good terms. If one of them is a real problem and you need it to go, you can do a traditional banishing. And often those kinds of spells or prayers start with a phrase about how strong your protectors are or how strong your deities are, and kind of bragging about that a little bit before you ask them to leave. There are so many similarities between all the beings I mentioned in terms of what they like and what they don't like. There are only a few distinguishing differences. But I do, again, just think it's so important to know the names of the spirits in a particular region of your ancestry. One of the things that I also think is so important about house spirits is they provide such a strong link between our day-to-day mundane tasks and the way we go about our lives and the other world, and help us stay in connection with the spirit world at all times. So this was an overview of the different types. Mostly I wanted to get you the names, and so I think it's important once you know the names to do some research, because there's often a lot of contradictory information and different folktales that come from different times within a particular region, and that's much more information than I can give about these very important beings than I could do in this very short video. I'd love to hear in the comments if you have ever left offerings for house spirits, and maybe even if you want, you can tell us if you had grandparents or great-grandparents that kept images of house spirits around or had stories about house spirits from the regions that they came from. I'd appreciate you checking out my Patreon page. I'm really trying to promote it right now so that I can continue doing this work. And thank you all who watch, like, subscribe, and comment so much. I appreciate it greatly. Thank you all, and until next time, stay safe and be well.